Today, I had a Red Bull. I had a Red Bull after over a month without any caffeine, and I gotta say, it feels pretty good, but in a very subtle way. I feel almost no effects because this is just 80 milligrams of caffeine. However, it is noticeable in the sense that I am more awake than I was before, and I do find it easier to think, and I seem to be processing information a bit faster, and it's a pretty good feeling overall. This amount of caffeine has always been pretty subtle for me. It doesn't do all that much for me. Typically, I need upwards of 150 to 200 milligrams of caffeine in order to feel significant effects. However, when I do that, there is a greater chance for side effects such as anxiety, so it has drawbacks. Another thing that I have noticed about consuming caffeine with tolerance is that essentially I find myself feeling all of the potential anxious side effects and very few of the benefits of the drug because I've become tolerant to the actual good parts of it. And so, by going back to what I used to do, which is consume caffeine in this more transient and uh, non habitual way, I am able to get more of the positive effects of it. And I think that's a good way to consume it, just every now and again, not sort of turn it into this thing that your brain is reliant on and dependent on. Because not only are you getting less out of the stuff, you're also um, essentially training yourself to need it to function, while at the same time um, getting mostly the potential side effects or negative effects. One of the things that I talked about in my other videos on this subject is the fact that I ended up experiencing heightened anxiety, heightened sensitivity to stressors, things like this, as a result of my caffeine consumption. And I was only consuming, at most 200 milligrams each day. And as soon as I woke up, I wasn't having more during the day or anything like that because I didn't want to mess up my sleep. And I'm also just not about that life. If something starts to wear off, hey, it wears off. That's that is how it works. Um, and so I ended up dealing with these problems, I think primarily as a result of tolerance and relying on it to have that extra energy when I woke up each day. And also in order to help my sleep, which sounds kind of weird because caffeine sort of has a somewhat negative impact on sleep, even though you're just having it right at the start of the day. It can still have an impact. And what I've noticed over the past month now is my sleep is much, much worse without it. And it's basically completely random every single night. Like not only am I getting fewer hours of sleep than I was before, I'm also sleeping at completely different times every single night instead of having largely consistent times each night that also fluctuated. Um, I am now getting literally a different time where I sleep every single night, and it doesn't feel very good to sleep. It's strange. It's like I'm not getting tired in the same way at the end of the day either, where like I'd have that caffeine crash and then my body would just kind of be like, okay, time to go to bed now. I don't have those indicators to go to bed. So I try to go to bed and I end up just being in there for hours and falling asleep at a completely different time every single night. It's not fun. So the way quitting has possibly at least impacted my sleep is not great. Of course, this is all just an assumption. It could be something else that is leading to that. I have no idea. But I would say it has been largely worth it because of the fact that I don't have this extra energy to focus on my anxiety with, or to exacerbate potential anxieties I could have. The main way in which this has been negative for me is reduced energy, reduced euphoria, worse memory, somewhat worse concentration, definitely worse motivation. But I've just been powering through it with willpower and with other methods, attempting to kind of submerge myself in water to make my brain pick up speed and things like that. Um, but it has been challenging. I'm excited about having this today because it feels pretty good. And tomorrow, I'm just going to go back to my regularly scheduled routine of not consuming any caffeine. Um, and I'll continue doing that for a while until it's time to consume it again. And, you know, if I continue sort of operating in that way, there's not really a chance for dependence or tolerance to develop, which I think is good. I think it's a better way of going about it. Because again, if you have that tolerance, you're going to inevitably experience more of the negative effects of the thing rather than primarily the positive effects, which is bad, and I don't want to deal with that. It's what seems to always happen when I have a daily caffeine habit. Um, and I tend to find myself, getting rid of it or going on breaks of certain lengths of time in order to reduce the extent to which I deal with that. Um, I would also cycle a lot, so spend a certain amount of time consuming significantly less so that I could pick it up. I could pick it back up again and consume a larger amount so that I'd get more of an effect. Um, I've done that many times, but I feel more comfortable with just leaving it for the most part and then using it as this treat on days where I am particularly tired or on days where I just want to have more of that jolt, more of that energy. Um, but of course, it's not something that's possible to sustain consistently, nor would I necessarily want to because of the aforementioned side effects. The interesting thing about these side effects for me, I think at least, is how inconsistent they would tend to be. Because at the start, I wouldn't deal with them. Um, and I wouldn't even consistently deal with them once they started to happen more often. So I would develop the tolerance from the daily habit of caffeine. And then I would end up dealing with the anxiety problems a little more, but it wouldn't happen every time I consumed it. It would be just this kind of inconsistent thing, this thing that occurred at times with more strength, more frequency. And I had a little anxiety over this period of no use, but it was nothing huge. If I had caffeine in the mix, the anxiety would have been pretty big. It would have exacerbated what I was facing, which gets into the topic of set and setting, which is extremely important. I think people don't really like to think about caffeine as a drug, even though that's what it is. The rules of set and setting apply to caffeine just as much as they apply to any other drug. With other drugs, you need to take into account how you're feeling, the health of your body, where you are, the situations that might transpire throughout the day, things like this, in order to ensure that you have a positive experience. And the same thing is true with caffeine. But because we have grown habitually accustomed to consuming caffeine as a daily sort of thing, we don't recognize that set and setting is still very important for caffeine. When we get really stressed during the day or really anxious during the day in response to the various phenomena that life throws at us, we don't assume, oh, maybe I'm experiencing this more because I had coffee today or whatever. We just assume that what we're dealing with is a product of our environment. And as someone who didn't start consuming caffeine daily until I was 19, I can tell you that that is most certainly not the case. I had to relearn all of my coping skills about life um, after I started consuming caffeine every day. And it took me multiple years of attempting to learn how to deal with my emotions and my body before I could, get to a good, stable place where I was fine again. And so caffeine made me so much more susceptible to stress and anxiety than I was before. Um, and it's because of set and setting. If the set and the setting is bad, you're going to have more bad effects from the drug. Um, and I had to learn how to deal with the world all over again in that unique context, which is something very important to take into account. And now that I have stopped, I am more cognizant of that than ever because during this period of time, I've found myself, feeling very similar to how I felt as a teenager before I started doing this stuff regularly. And I like that feeling. I enjoy that. Um, I'm not going to consume caffeine on days that are stressful or where things might be stressful or where I'm, feeling a little odd. I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to do it on days that are pretty much guaranteed to be good and where I'm doing fine. And in that way, I can avoid the side effects, especially the worst of the side effects. Um, Trying to remember if there's anything else that I wanted to say. I mean, no, that's basically it. I think that's what I was missing in my recent blog post about caffeine called The End of Caffeine. And I think I could expand on it in a future blog post, maybe perhaps talking about the broad concept of set and setting and the importance of it. Um, but it's kind of crazy that because, 90% of humans on Earth are living in an altered state and not realizing it, they fail to take this into account. And I think it can have, at least at times, disastrous outcomes because there are severely anxious people out there that are likely exacerbating the problem with their caffeine consumption, and they don't even know that. Perhaps those people should start consuming it again after getting their anxiety under control and only in a inconsistent way, just on days where everything seems like it's going well. I don't know. To make more videos outside. I need to take my cameras, all of my strange cameras from the 90s and the early 2000s, and go film weird shit in the city, and then edit it all together in the form of a strange vlog for all of you, for your enjoyment, for your consumption. I need to do it. I need to find varied environments to do a variety of things in for various videos. Let's see what's going on Denpa. What is happening on this strange website? It looks like somebody is talking about this odd stuff. It looks like this person is struggling with the idea of love, which brings soft, soulful pain. Honestly, these people, like recommendation guys, please learn how to do punctuation, capitalization, and formatting. Like, it is not comfortable to read a post that looks like this. What is this, bro? Like, look, this this laptop is like a regular sized screen. This is what this post looks like without formatting. It's just this long, kind of arduous to read looking thing. You don't need to do this, guys. Why? Like, what is this shit? Like, why are there posts that look like this on this website? Like, is there an example of a post I've written on here somewhere? I think there was like someone in this post I responded to, or was it a different post? No, I think it was a different post. I think it was in the State of Denpa post. Like, I'm gonna just give like an example, okay? I'm gonna give an example of something that I said on here if I could ever possibly find it. I might have to search lounge in order to find this shit. But okay, the state of Denpa-chan. So okay, guys, here's a post that I wrote. This is a post that I wrote. Now, it's not a fantastic post. It's not the best written post or anything. But look, it's formatted. Like this is one paragraph. This is another paragraph. This is another paragraph. Okay? It's still, it could probably look better. It's kind of mucho texto, but that's how you make a post. That is how you make a post. You don't do whatever the fuck this is, where you just like layer text onto text onto text. This does not look appealing to anybody. I can assure you that. No one likes this. No one agrees with this. And then this guy's post, like you literally have to click this little thing down here in order. It's covering the text. It's literally covering the text. I can't see anything, bro. What is going on here? I mean, I guess I could pull it down every time. How did he even do this? How does this even happen? How does this occur? I literally have no idea. I don't know how this is possible. I don't. I mean, it's kind of a good shitpost. Let's be real here. But like, how is this possible? See these guys? See these guys right here? These are the Romans. And you see, the Romans are always invading. The Romans are always invading because they can't stop invading. I don't think I know how to be a friend. And this is something I've talked about in my videos many times. I've also talked about my attempts to and struggles with rectifying this possible issue. But it seems that the more time I have spent here on Earth, the more that I have come to accept my preference for solitude, as I've often described it. For as many times as I have attempted to break out of it because I believed there would be benefits associated with it, or because I wanted to see what more experiences with other people would be like, there have been a far larger number of times where I have realized and then realized again that that vision of life does not align with my own. One in which I am going out to bars or clubs or having these long conversations with people when I could otherwise be studying, for example, where I realized that my preference is clear. And it's strange for me because it seems that whenever I have a friend outside of a very, select few, this thing seems to inevitably happen, and pretty early on, mind you, where I elect to spend time alone rather than with them. And the friendship ends up feeling kind of one-sided because it's really them pulling hair to try and get a hold of me. And time again, I find myself back in that same place again, studying and maximizing the utility of my time. And then when I am relaxing and spending more, more kind of calm time that is not so explicitly focused on work, I'm doing stuff by myself. I'm not doing stuff with other people. And I'm not doing stuff with other people because my preference for things to do is very clear. My preference for places to be is very clear. I am not someone who is easily stimulated by the outdoors and being around others. I am not someone who frequently desires those things, if ever. And I think it's a reflection of my upbringing. The fact that I was homeschooled for nearly the entirety of the time in which I was supposed to be in school. The fact that even when I was in school, I interacted with people very little, and that was for a very short period of time, um, just a little bit over 2 years in total. And overall, I have found myself deeply attached to my own routines, my own solitary activities, and the primary way in which I seem to connect with the world and other people is just through posting these videos. Um, and some part of me um, just wants to stop disappointing people because I know that this is going to happen over and over again because it seems to happen over and over again. It's this kind of pattern that doesn't just constantly repeat. It's one that I refuse to change because of this clear preference that I have, um, this this thing that I like more to do more than this other thing, which is, to be by myself. Um, it's like every time I attempt to change this about myself or to engage in self discovery and to try new things, no matter how full throated my attempt at changing is, I wind up in the same place. And I wind up feeling more committed to the idea of staying in that place. I wind up feeling like not only is it okay to be like this, which I have always felt, but that it is the best possible path for someone like me, for someone with the preferences and the inclinations that I happen to have. Um, it's something I tried to describe um, in another video that I'll link in the description. By the way, the video that I was talking about was literally called Living in My Own World. Um, but needless to say, I am living in a strange world. I am one strange cat. Years ago now, about 7 years ago, in a video about an insecurity I had at the time, a fear I had of being boring. I hated being defined that way because it reminded me of all of the times that I was called that growing up by my father when I would struggle to speak or get a sentence out, when I was not sufficiently entertaining as a 3 and 4 year old. Uh, the notion that a child that age should be entertaining in the first place, or that anyone should be entertaining for that matter, is quite a strange one, and it's not one that I tend to agree with. But being treated in that manner led me to develop some issues with my self esteem and with how I saw the world. Of course, over time, those wounds get healed, and you can't let the past control you forever, and you change. Um, um, Over time, I started to relate to that video less and less because I felt fewer insecurities in this area and in many other areas for that matter. To the point where now I am simply willing to refer to myself as a boring person. I refer to myself as a boring person because I am not interested in going to somebody's tailgate party or the gym with them, although I do like to exercise. I am not interested in going to somebody's fiesta or something like that. I don't want to do any of these things. I don't want to go to the nightclub. I, I'm not about that world. Um, a lot of the things that other people like to go out and do, I don't want to do. I am not interested in getting into 1,000,001 relationships and trying to fuck every bitch in town. I'm not about that life. You know, there have been moments in my life when I was curious as to what that was like and thought, what would it be like if I went down that path? And every single time, I was met with the reality of what I actually wanted to do very quickly. And it seems that with each passing year, I only become more resolute in my core assumptions about the world, which is that the world is a place which is best to be enjoyed. It is a place that we did not choose to end up in, but we can make very enjoyable if we simply do the things that matter most to us, that appeal most to us. And that is not going to look the same for every person. If you have a good sense of what appeals to you, you can pretty quickly circumvent the process of having to do a lot of trial and error throughout the years to figure out what you like and who you are. I am lucky in the sense that I never had to go through that. It was pretty clear to me what I liked from pretty early on, and I'm still doing it. It was also pretty clear to me what I didn't like. For as many suggestions as I got to the contrary, I knew what I wanted to do and what I didn't want to do. And whenever I tried to kind of enter into these other people's worlds, to kind of engage with what they liked, the more clear it became what I liked. And because of that, I refer to myself as a boring person. I like to stay in my room. I like to play video games. I like to read on the internet to find whatever pieces of information I can piece together in order to uh, develop a better understanding of the world and to try and create these intricate stories in my mind of events. I enjoy learning languages. I have a lot of books about that subject. It is something that I dedicate the most of my day to doing, and it is the passion and hobby that I am at this point the most passionate about. Kind of because it relates to every hobby that I have. It relates to media consumption because there are video games, movies, books, and all sorts of other things in my target languages. It also relates to my desire to understand history and politics because every country with a language has politics. It also relates to my desire to get a better sense of what the human race is like and how different people feel and function. Of course, understanding other cultures on that deeper level will help you do that. And so when I look at these passions that I have, um, and I look at language learning, it just so happens that language learning coincides with literally all of them. And so as a result of that, I find myself engaging in that hobby most frequently, which is pretty cool. But it's not exactly a lot of other people's idea of fun. A lot of other people's idea of fun is more outdoors with other people doing these things that I am fundamentally not interested in. I've never been a particularly social person. I was never raised as a particularly social person. And it seems that the times that I have attempted to immerse myself in that world ended up very bad for me. Not because of anything anyone was doing or anything I was doing, but because no matter how well it seemed like everything was going, the fact that I was immersing myself in those social environments was in and of itself negative. It was something that was tearing apart my psyche. It was something that caused problems for me time and time again, simply because simply because I could not enjoy the time that I was spending. And in each and every case, I had somewhere else that I would rather be. The place that I would rather be was in my room engaging in my hobbies, which isn't to say that I don't enjoy the company of others at times. especially when we happen to be engaging in hobbies with one another. But it is this desire to socialize that I find in a very limited capacity. I have this in a very limited capacity, um, and I think this is not a bad thing, but rather a strength, because that that desire for solitude, that preference for time spent with things that I care about, can translate into real material results for my goals. And maybe you have different goals. Maybe you're interested in whatever you're interested in, but that's entirely the point. From the perspective of society, from the perspective of someone who is not interested in the stuff I'm interested in, at least not to the same extent, which would happen to be most people, I am quite a boring person because I am not interested in doing the stuff that they want to do, the stuff that they find interesting or not boring. And that's okay. There is absolutely nothing wrong with being someone who happens to, want a little less stimulation, who happens to find a lot of things in the world overstimulating even, but takes solace and experiences comfort in these kinds of activities that they can consistently rely on in their routine. And um, it's interesting because I remember many years ago, well, not that many years ago, it was around 2020, sort of 2021, 2020, when I was having a conversation with my father about something. I won't say exactly what, but I was talking to him and I just mentioned something about science. I was sort of trying to look out for him and to um, explain a problem he was having based on some research that I had done pretty extensively. And his response was just to say, "You're boring. You're boring. You you know, I don't want to hear about this." And in that moment, he really didn't want to understand why he was having the problem he was having. He was more interested in insulting me for even having the knowledge in the first place and daring to share it than engaging in what were my attempts at having a conversation, a dialogue about the thing. Because it wasn't like I was just spamming information at him either. Like I was actively trying to engage with him about the subject while sharing tidbits of information related to it, and he just wasn't having it. He wasn't having it because I happened to have been explaining something that uh, on a deeper level. And that doesn't make me boring, but it does make the things that I was saying boring in his opinion. Because for him, it's all about kind of partying and seeing as many people as possible and not really thinking about anything too deeply because he's just sort of drifting from experience to experience to experience nonstop and not really spending too much time to really sit down and consider his decisions or reflect on them. He's a very impulsive person in that manner. And I don't know him very well. I haven't spent a lot of time with him throughout my life, but it's the sense that I have had from my interactions with him, especially as he's gotten older. He's become more impulsive and less introspective. To the extent that he even had any control back in the day. Um, and this just creates a situation where um, I I was sitting there, and it kind of brought me back because I remembered how many times I was called that for very innocuous things growing up. Things that were not bad to do or to be, especially that at that age. And how perhaps the intention behind saying it was merely to get me to be quiet, to get me to go away, you know, to get me to not partake in some of the only social interactions I had available to me because of course at that age I didn't have access to other kids to interact with. I didn't have access really to anybody. And rather than attempting to engage with me and aid in my development as a child, there were these negative sort of assumptions for me to have about myself that ended up being reinforced. And in that moment, a couple years ago, it sort of felt like that stuff was flooding back. And this was during, of course, the time in which I still lived there, which was very bad for my mental health in so many ways. But I I I knew that I didn't like the fact that those memories were coming back. When it felt like I had started to gain more confidence and unravel a lot of what had been done, but I could never completely unravel it until I got out of there. Until I got out of there and I spent a substantial portion of time actually, living in a different place and eventually forgiving him for all those different times. Because, what you come to see as time goes on is that other people just have their own preferences about the world. They have their own preferences about their routine, about the things that they do, about the information that is available to them or could be available to them. They have different preferences about how even to conduct a conversation. It's why they have different friends than other people. It's why they like and don't like so many things. And that is ultimately going to inform who they see as boring and who they don't. It has nothing actually to do with you. And of course, in his case, what we're looking at is someone with significant amounts of brain damage due to various factors that I won't get into in this video, and someone who had to deal with massive amounts of gang violence as a child. And of course, when you're kind of inculcated into that culture of violence, there is like you're not really going to be thinking about stuff. If I talked about stuff that I was studying in school that I found to be interesting, or if I talked about stuff that I was studying independently that I found to be interesting, he either discouraged me for making him insecure or didn't want to engage with it, or when I would get praise for what I was doing, it was solely the in the very narrow context of, okay, you're my kid, and this reflects good on me. And that wasn't a subtle thing that was being implied either. It was a very, very explicit aspect of how he explained that he was proud of me. There was not a single time in which I was told that without many caveats being given that, oh yeah, well, the reason you're like this is because of me and because I am so incredible and amazing. And then he would just spend the entire time sitting there waxing himself and talking about himself, how incredible he supposedly is. And I remember so many times, it just made me feel so small growing up, feeling like, well, there's not really anything to what I'm doing. If this is sort of the response that I'm getting. It's like everything is sort of viewed through this prism of himself, and he can't sincerely compliment somebody who's related to him without in some way taking credit for it. It's very strange. Or discrediting other people for it. Like he would always say, all the good things about you are because of me and all the bad things are because of your mother. He would always say that. Even though it seems that I learned so many things from her: introspection, a love of literature and education, because my mom is a highly educated person as well as a former educator herself, pretty much the polar opposite of the guy that she ended up getting with, and came from a highly educated background too. A lot of the, you know, pretty much everybody in her family is a teacher or has a PhD or is highly successful in some other regard. And um, I look at sort of the lineage she comes from, and then I also look at my dad, someone who maybe would have been successful if not for all of the stuff that happened to him, because he also came from a family of highly successful people, of people with professional jobs, data systems analysts, lawyers, things like this. Um, but then he was the one that was getting involved in gangs, getting involved in fights, and sort of just falling into all of it at a very, very young age, and essentially becoming retarded. Like those experiences really broke him, and he didn't really have the support system or the tools to try and get better. Um, it also seems that his personality developed in a way where he didn't want to get better. That wasn't really considered an option. I don't think he had this framework where he thought, treating other people in a better way and trying to be self-reliant instead of just parasitically mooching off of others. I don't think any of this is valuable, is sort of how he would see it in his own mind. And um, it's strange because you have to, in order to forgive, you have to kind of look at what happened to someone else, where they were coming from, and then try to put yourself in their same shoes, and then say, okay, I understand. If I were in that situation, maybe I would do the same thing. It's it's difficult to believe. You don't really want to believe it because it doesn't feel good to kind of imagine that you also have the potential for evil, that you also, if the circumstances lined up in the right way, could hurt other people. It doesn't feel good to think about that. But in order to forgive, you have to look at the circumstances in their totality. And through forgiving him and forgiving other people that I've had very negative experiences with in this department, um, I developed the ability to just very confidently call myself boring and own it. I developed the ability to see the things that so many people have decided to say about me and just scroll past it. Just go, oh, there's another one. You know, they feel that way. I feel this way. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe they're right. That's life. And once you're able to do that, it takes a lot of pressure and stress off of your shoulders because you're no longer looking at everything in such cataclysmic terms. You're no longer feeling so strongly in response to some of these things. And, it helps a lot because, especially if you're putting yourself out there on the internet, there's going to be a lot of people who have a lot of opinions, but none of it really matters. Like it's all just people who say things. And some of it may be true, even if you don't know right now, maybe it is true. And if it is true, maybe that's not a bad thing. You know, I don't personally consider myself boring because I find the things that I like interesting. And I find the way that I express myself about them to be generally neutral. Or sometimes I think it's good because I like the style that I write in or something when I'm able to do it well and things like that. I make these videos because they're the kind of videos I would watch. A lot of people like another style. Of course, all of this should be pretty obvious, and it has been to me for a while, and aspects of it have been obvious to me for a much longer time. But As it relates to this specific term, boring, and applying it to myself, um, that has taken more time. That has taken more time for me to fully accept. And after I did, I managed to just own it. I managed to just strut myself around and go, yeah, I am a pretty boring person. I like to be inside. I like to do all this stuff that I talk about all the time in these videos, and I love it. It's fucking amazing. I would love to do this again and again and again for all time. If you told me to go back and relive my life, I wouldn't do a thing different. Because right now, I wake up every single day happy and thrilled and energized because I can live my life on my own terms, doing the things that I care about. And that is the very opposite of boring. But only I get to have my experience because only I am in my brain and my body, which is also kind of an amazing thing in and of itself because I don't have to deal with any noise from the outside world, the people who want to make everything about themselves, who want to kind of comment and pass judgment. I'm always in here, and they're always out there. And in that sense, they don't have any power over me. I am in my brain, in my body, and they are in theirs. Effectively, what they are is ones and zeros. On the internet, especially, that is what they are, because on the internet, you can never confirm the authenticity of any statement. Every statement is kind of a heightened version of itself, a more ironic or exaggerated version of something that perhaps some would say face to face, but in most cases, very few would, because we understand um, the rules and because we have shame for um, for how others might react to us if we violate many of these rules. Um, for all of those reasons, I find it difficult to be bothered by the things that people say, not just online, but also in person. Because time and time again, I am reminded of the fact that it is merely their opinion. And opinions don't really matter all that much. You know, perhaps they're true, perhaps they are not. But more often than not, they are merely a reflection of the preferences of the person who stated the opinion in the first place. They're not some objective value assessment of the uh, rate of boringness versus interestingness over time in one individual, because that is not possible to measure or observe. It's not something that is quantifiable. Um, you are you. You exist. And that's it, really. Okay, in this next clip, I'm going to say a bunch of stupid shit that I don't even believe. I claim that I'm leaving the mod team, which is not something that I'm doing. I also claim that No Thank You is engaging in authoritarianism on the board, which I think is very strong language, and I probably should not have used that strong of language. I also claim that I'm never going to read the board again, which is quite unlikely. Uh, Frankly, I think I was just in a strange mood when I recorded this video. I had some odd ideas that hadn't been ironed out yet. Um, After talking with No Thank You on VC about the issue, the ideas ended up being a lot less tenable. You know, I came to see his perspective much better, and the stuff that I said in the video ended up coming off a lot more silly. So I am including the video in this one, but just know that everything I say is very strange and not very fleshed out, and it's too strongly worded. And that I understand what he's doing with the site now. I think he's just trying to make it more of a cultivated experience so that it's better for the users of the site, and so the population of the site actually does grow. I will say I do stand by what I said insofar as having less moderation is concerned, but that is simply due to a difference in opinion. Um, I do like a lot of image boards that have a more cultivated experience, such as Sushi Chan, such as Lane Chan. However, I also like a lot of boards that do not have a very cultivated experience. And ultimately, there is no truly right way to run one of these websites. Um, I tend to fall more in the camp of someone who likes less moderation. And while he is not directly talking about engaging in more moderation on the whole, what he is talking about is engaging in more cultivation, which is, I would say, neutral, even though I personally disagree with that direction. I still think it has the potential to produce a very good website. And I also happen to think that that particular way of going about things makes sense, especially from his perspective, and we will see how it goes. Um, I'm including this clip primarily because I think it explains a lot of my broader philosophy about this type of website. I also don't like deleting clips. Any clip that I produce, I try to upload to the internet for archival purposes and because I want all of the lore to be out there. I want people to see me in all of my facets at all the various times that have existed, at least on recording. I think people have a right to that information. And it is a part of the broader project of this channel, which is to be an archive. I want to be an archive. I want to have as many of my thoughts and feelings that have ever occurred at any time available on the internet. It's one of the guiding principles of this channel that I have always had. And with that, on with the next segment. I have a problem with the current direction that the website Denpa-chan is going in. And in fact, I have so much of a problem with it that I feel that my help moderating the site is not needed anymore. I don't want to moderate it. In fact, in general, I don't even want to read it um, because I completely disagree with the more authoritarian direction that the website is being taken in, with threads being closed, with threads or individual posts being deleted. I don't like this. And I'm going to get into why. I'm also going to get into um, some of the things that I found charming or unique about the website in the first place that I think are going away now. So when Denpa-chan was first initialized, it was viewed as an alternative to No Thank You's Discord, a replacement to it. It was themed around Denpa, kind of the broad fandom surrounding our videos, the broad artistic movement surrounding our videos. And when it first started, a lot of people on there were talking about like Pars and me to some extent, and No Thank You, and Jelaine, and Dotesmite, and there was a lot of discussion about this medium, but not just the medium, also the um, the ideas associated with it. There were a lot of discussions about like difficulty connecting with others or strange art and LGBT issues and things like this. It's discussions that are kind of often had in this sphere. And I found it, to be pretty unique in the context of an image board or especially a BBS, like just a Chan, because um, you don't normally see this kind of culture all stuck together like this. Like it felt like the website had a very distinct and unique culture which all stemmed from the fact that most of the people posting on there were people who came from our channels. What No Thank You seems to say now is that he actually doesn't want the website to be primarily made up of people who watch our videos. He would rather the website be primarily people who post on BBSs. And so by taking the website in this more heavily moderated direction, what it essentially does is discourage people who are actually Denpas from posting on the website, which is ostensibly for Denpas, and to instead, in place of that, create this more traditional kind of BBS where you get, maybe at most 2 posts a day on a really good day, and more likely like 5 posts a week. Um, it's not really the direction that I think most people associated the website with. Um, I don't really know what's going on there anymore, to be honest. I know he has some big plans for it. Frankly, I don't want to be involved. Um, it's his website, like in the same way that I can sit here and can complain about 4chan or the direction that some of the alt chans that I like have gone in. It's like it's not like I have any power over those websites either. Like I have literally one job on the website, and it's just to delete spam, to delete things that are literally illegal to post. Um, and so when I'm not doing that, I'm using the website the same way anybody else would. That is how I think a Chan should be. I do not think a Chan should be heavily moderated. Um, and of course, he would contend that no, it's actually not being heavily moderated. We're just keeping all of the discussions about Denpa related subjects in one thread, which is the DenpaTube general thread, which already doesn't make any sense given the fact that the website is literally called Denpa Chan. So, how are you simultaneously going to make a website themed around the fan base of the genre of video that we take a part in, while also discouraging the very discussion of that genre of video that the website was initially formed around? Like that doesn't make any sense. And so there's some very basic like aesthetic contradictions here too, because like you're going to make the whole website themed around Denpas, but then relegate discussion of Denpas to one single thread. Like it doesn't make any sense. Now, if it were a website that we happened to just administer that was called something else, that was a much more general kind of otaku themed or neat otaku themed BBS or something, then okay, I could understand having one single thread that is primarily meant to discuss that one subject. But I mean, even on 4chan, right? Or a lot of other image boards or BBSs. I keep bringing up image boards because I get them mixed in my head when I talk about chants. But they're all listen, they're all primarily coming from the same origin point. I'll let you figure out what I mean by that. But when I think about this, and I think about the general threads on those other websites. Uh, Generally, it is not strictly enforced that you have to post in those threads. Like, there are usually other threads where the mod will just kind of politely gesture, like, hey, please go over here, and then generally people will go over there. Because the communities are self-moderating, they're self-managed, which is how a Chan should be. I don't think the format of a Chan is conducive to this kind of heavy moderation that you would see on forums and things like that, where you're giving massive amounts of power to the mods. I don't believe in that. I don't agree with that. It goes against kind of my principles around the internet, which again, it's not my website, so I'm not saying what he should do. I'm saying what I would do and why I disagree with the direction he's going in, respectfully. Um, and so I think even on like the examples of with the examples of these other websites, you do not see this situation where the mods are really clamping down hard on anybody who happens to like go off topic or whatever in a thread or bring something up that might be related but related to something else in this general thread. They're not doing that. You know, it's like this kind of authoritarian fervor uh, is not what a Chan is about. And um, I mean, frankly, if you don't like Denpas being discussed, perhaps call the website something other than Denpa Chan. Like, it doesn't, like, this direction just doesn't make any sense. Like, it feels like I'm watching, like, in real time, like the unraveling of a thing that was deliberately built one way, but then it's sort of like, okay, wait, we made some mistakes here, gotta reassess, but like not fully redoing the thing from the ground up, just trying to figure out, okay, how can we kind of like tweak around the edges to like liberal style to like make it like sort of work, but like not really. And I don't like that. I don't like that whole situation, that whole world. Um, if the goal is for it to be an otaku focused text board, then just call it something else. Um, and I mean, good luck with that. It's not like anyone is going to post there. I think one of the things that made this the most popular BBS right now in the English speaking world is the fact that it is our BBS. You know, it is the BBS for Denpas, for people who are fans of Denpa videos, kind of a group of people which is uniquely positioned um, to be on a website like that in the first place because they are people who care very much about autism, about otaku, about kind of the e-shitification of the internet and the gradual decline of the discourse that has occurred as a result of modern internet aesthetics and all of the incentive structures that come with that. So you have a group of people that are very passionate about these subjects that all happen to be in one place, which is watching our videos. And you direct them to this website that sort of has the goal of kind of saving this format and generating discussion through it once again instead of just kind of sitting around and dying like all of these other websites are. Um, and you get that, like that actually happens. And then the response is, I don't like that people are posting on my website. Let's like completely redo this because the stuff they're posting is about is not what I like. And it's like, okay, well maybe you shouldn't have incentivized them to do that. Like it just seems like there were so many errors committed one after another. Like if you intended to arrive at this point in the first place, where like you're trying to set up um, an otaku focused website, then like why didn't you just do that from the beginning? Like if that was your goal, you literally went about that in the worst possible way. So I don't frankly I don't know what's going on. I don't fully I was going to say I don't fully agree with what's going on. I don't agree at all with what's going on there. Um, and I say I may, I may make my own Denpa focused website if this one does in fact end up kind of rebranding and changing what it's about. I'm still looking into the whole process, but it very well may occur in the near future. Um, yeah, I mean, I frankly I just find it kind of sad because it was one of my favorite places on the internet. There were quite a few mediocre posts that I even had a tendency to complain about, but that's part of being on a Chan. The point of a Chan, in some respects, is to be mediocre. It's in anonymous form where you can, post messages and stuff. Um, People are going to say lots of wild and out there stuff on anonymous message boards. Um, but sometimes these things happen. There's not sort of a cohesive vision, and so the sites end up dying over time. And that's really the sense that I get about this site right now is I feel like it's dying. It's getting fewer posts than it was. Um, I think there is a contingent of people from other websites that like the direction that he's trying to take it in. Um, but frankly, I'm not entirely sure what those people were doing there to begin with, like why they were there in the beginning. Um, because, from my understanding, it was a community for Denpas. And people can become Denpas at any time. Perhaps you stumble across the website and you see discussion of all of these strange creators you've never heard of and go, huh, well, these people really seem to be talking a lot about this. What is going on here? This is really strange. The aesthetic of this website is strange. Feels like it's something from the 1990s. The people who seem to be really into this stuff are also pretty strange. That's curious. The people that they're discussing seem to be really strange. What is going on here? And then they investigate. And I know personally a few people who happen to have found my content from that sort of investigation, from having found the website in other places. And I think that is a natural part of discovery on the internet, right? You sometimes encounter these boards that focus on topics that you're not entirely interested in or things that you didn't know about before going on there. And you get curious and you check it out. Um, and you happen to find out about something totally new that you didn't know you'd be into. Or even if you don't get into it, it's interesting just because it's weird and different. And I think that is the perspective of a lot of the people who like to explore the internet and stumble across these strange websites that are outside of the mainstream web. Um, it seems a little alien to us because we are actually the ones making these videos. Like, oh, hey, if we're doing them, how strange can it really be? But I also think to some extent the point is to be strange. The point is to be authentic, no matter how much strangeness that entails. And in fact, the strangeness is part of the point. It's part of what makes it good. Um, and that's also why, I tend to be excited to find videos in this genre or people who are attempting to connect with that kind of feeling. Um, it's one that matters a lot to me personally. But again, my personal feelings on the issue are not what ultimately determines the direction that the website goes in. I play a I play a very minimal role in its administration, almost a non-existent one because I literally have just one job. But because of that, I'm kind of in this interesting position, as someone who has been a fan of these kinds of websites for over 10 years now and has been very passionate about them, has also been very passionate about this type of video for that entire period of time. Um, been very passionate about kind of strange personalities on the web and strange autists and communication styles and things like this. Um, it leads me to come away from this with a very specific perspective, one that values the uniqueness of Denpa-chan within the context of Chan's, that values the uniqueness of its users over other similar websites, and one that really sees the potential in the website to be a good place to hang out. If you happen to enjoy discussing subject matter related to this type of video. And when I say related, I don't just literally mean like the videos themselves, the people involved, the way that they're made or whatever. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about also the kinds of subjects that we talk about here. Difficulty connecting with others, otaku, the broad subject of otaku, the broad subject of technological freedom insofar as it relates to like Unix and privacy and the small internet and all these great things. Um, I'm talking about autism. I'm talking about freak power. I'm talking about all of these things. And historically, the website was very good at discussing these things. It was a very good vehicle for that. Yeah, there were a lot of threads about us or that discussed our videos, and a lot of them tended to be pretty funny because, they were kind of doing banter or taking the piss or just saying, silly and strange things. Other times, you had people coming away with interpretations that are quite odd, from some of the videos that probably weren't the intended reaction. But hey, I mean, you can't get the intended reaction uh, from every person. Part of what's interesting about making this type of video is generating discussion, having people disagree with you, and actually seeing those points of view be articulated. I mean, even if someone is really mad at you, it's a Chan. On a Chan, everybody can discuss their opinion, no matter how strange or stupid it may be. And in fact, that is viewed as a positive in the context of a Chan, because on a Chan, you have a truly free exchange of ideas, one in which the people, are going through these topics, and you can actually come to appreciate the other points of view if you don't put too much of yourself into it. And I think that might be part of the problem too, because if you're looking at these threads about our videos and then you're thinking, oh my God, they're talking about me, or, oh my God, what's going on here? I didn't mean to say this. Like, what are people thinking about this? You're not going to be enjoying the discussion. You're overthinking it. Instead, just kind of try to look at what that person is going for, and see it from their perspective. Try to sort of put yourself in their shoes, and they go, huh, oh, that's interesting. That I don't know. It's kind of a strange way of going about it. But maybe I would think the same thing in different circumstances. Um, that's what I do with these posts, and they don't bother me. Um, of course, I'm not trying to allege what may be going on with him. Um, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure it's largely just a problem with you know with a type of discussion he doesn't really like, and it's not much more complicated than that. But I just know what my perspective is, and with this video, I am attempting to explain um, why I like the discussion I've seen on the website, why I think it works, and why I think it's actually very positive in the broader context of BBS and boards. Um, I I look at the discussions being had and the posts, and I appreciate the passion behind them. But no matter, what persuasion they're coming from, how they decide to go about the topic, or what the topic may even be, I think that the thing that binds virtually everyone on the website together is autism, and a more specific form of autism, which is known as Denpa. Um, and hey, if that's going to be systematically undone, then fine, right? That is the way things that's just the way things go sometimes. But I don't agree. I don't agree with that direction. Um, and perhaps this video will inspire somebody to make their own website or change some people's minds regarding this, but that's not my intention. My intention is, more than anything, to talk about why I really loved what Denpa-chan was, and why I am going to miss it now that it's changing. I I think as it moves in this more heavily moderated direction, and as it moves away from its core mission of being a website for Denpas, um, I think it's going to become this kind of Frankenstein monster that ultimately receives very little attention or posts, and therefore there is very little reason to regularly check it. Uh, therefore, you know, only uh, kicking the can down the road, kind of making the initial problem even bigger. So there's my thoughts on the end of Denpa-chan. There is one thing that I miss about the year of 2021 that I don't talk about often on this channel, and it's partially because that was a year where I did not record very many videos at all, primarily because that was a year in which I was fake as hell, and this YouTube channel is meant to be real as hell. So the videos that I would try to record just wouldn't come out right, and I wouldn't feel like posting them. If I tried at all, most of the time I just didn't try because I knew that I was not going to be able to play the character that I was trying to play around the people that I knew at the time. Um, but there's one aspect of that year that I haven't discussed very much that was one of the very few things about said year that I actually liked, which was the fact that I had traveled around the world for the first time. I went to another continent for the first time in my life, and it gave me experience. It taught me some things about other people and cultures, but um, more than anything, it was something that I was actually able to enjoy at the time because there was a certain plague that I will not name that was going around the planet, and it was actually quite difficult to travel due to that. There were many restrictions both in my country and around the world, and even without the restrictions, even with the ways to get around them, few people wanted to take those risks, given the severity of what was going on at the time. Because of that, I felt that it was the perfect time for me to get out of my room, because oftentimes the airports were empty, the streets were empty. They weren't as empty as the previous year of 2020, unfortunately, which was another time that I also really liked to be outside in and to go around in. But I digress. Um, Whenever outbreaks of stronger and newer strains happened, was a time when I would travel, because you would hear about it in the news, and then new restrictions would be instituted, and you'd be in the airport and virtually no one was there. Of course, by that point in time, I had already been well inoculated from the disease. I had had multiple vaccines. I had gotten sick at a certain point that year, and so I was like even more ready to go. Um, and in that sense, like I was all good, like there was really no risk to me, nor was there a much risk of me giving any kind of disease to anybody. So it just sort of felt like everybody was panicking because of the unknown. And to the extent that the facts were unknown, I was not afraid of them. Um, what I was more excited about was the fact that I didn't have to be overwhelmed in public spaces, which was a feeling I had been accustomed to up to that point. And even when I wasn't overwhelmed, I just didn't enjoy being around all those other people. You know, I this was at a point in my life when I was relatively accustomed to being outside and kind of being around others, but I didn't like it. I didn't like that feeling of seeing all these people around doing their things, having their conversations, having their feelings, living in their own worlds. I I wanted to be able to experience these places in an unvarnished kind of way, in a way that they weren't really meant to be experienced. I wanted to see these wide open areas that would normally be so populated that you can't see all of the details in them. And I wanted to see them wide open, empty, very few other people around. Um, I felt calm when I did experience that. I felt, for the first time, at home in a public space. I felt like all of the kinds of things that I would have running through my mind up to that point, or didn't feel like I was able to fully enjoy about the environment, were now at peace. I felt like I could be at peace. And after that, I started to wish that I could experience that again, that I could that I could be in a public space again and have that kind of tranquility and calm, that I could be alone with my thoughts and with myself in places other than my room or the forest, in places that I typically wouldn't be found in all that often. A part of me still has that wish. A part of me wants to experience something like that again. But then at the same time, I'm content to have the memories, to have known what it was like, and to treat that as but another chapter in what will ultimately, hopefully, be a long life. Um, I don't know. Part of me wants to go back there and go to even more places. Get it on recording for myself instead of, fully experiencing it, uh, without really grabbing any memories. I'm glad I did experience it because I have it in my memory, but I feel like there were so many opportunities to make art in that space. There are towns and cities in the world that are completely empty at night, but rarely are they as big as what I'm looking for, what I'm looking back on. And that's part of where my nostalgia comes from. It comes from a recognition that that was really possibly a once in a lifetime kind of event where I got to experience something that I could only imagine up to that point, that I could only fantasize about. And there will come a time when I tell my own children about that period where everything in the world just stood still, everything just paused. It's kind of an incredible thing to think about. It feels extraordinary. Um, and yet it happened. Throughout my life, a lot of my dreams have revolved around being someone who is not constrained by obligations, being someone who has the resources to do what I want when I want and not have to worry about making bank to get by. It seems like a simple dream at first. I also think it's a dream shared by many people, but they tend to put it in different terms or describe it a different way. Like, for example, a lot of people talk about wanting to work from home or wanting to start their own business so that they have more free time, but all of these dreams revolve around the same thing, which is this idea that working for somebody else kind of sucks. So people tend to want to work for themselves in some respect, or to at least have a job that allows for them to have a lot more free time or comfort. And it's interesting to me because the American dream has often been expressed to me as a dream in which um, you can enter the middle class and have a lot of your free time intact, that you can have an abundance of resources, of things that you can enjoy, um, and also time. Because there's that old phrase, time is money, and that you enter that place through entrepreneurship, through making certain choices in order to do well in the context of the market economy, and ultimately um, save a lot of time for yourself. The most valuable thing that you could have. Um, I've had these dreams of being able to sustain this lifestyle for a long time, for as long as I can remember. But moreover, I've had dreams of being able to pursue whatever I want, such as language learning, for example, which is what I've been pursuing and documenting on this channel, um, where I'm able to, uh, to consume as much art and media as I happen to want to, where I'm able to spend time for myself. These are what my dreams have revolved around. And then, of course, there's been things that I've wanted to do with all of that time that I have been doing thus far, that of course have been the subject of other videos. But um, the the basic fact always remains the same, which is that my time is the most valuable thing that I could possibly have, and this seems to be a prominent fact in my life. I spoke earlier in another clip about how I often leave people on red, or they really have to pull hair and teeth in order to get into contact with me. And that is because I value my time to such an extent that if there is something about a social interaction that is not, um, I don't know, grabbing at my attention and really, really good for me, I will simply choose other things that are better for me. Is that a literally selfish way of approaching relations with other people? Yes, it is. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't think that prioritizing your own time in a way that most accurately suits your needs and most maximally, um, allows for you to do the things you want is a bad thing. If there's an interaction I don't want to have, I can just choose to not have it. It's really that simple. Um, but that does make me a bad and inconsistent friend for most people. There are a few individual people that seem to accept this dynamic, and there is a much smaller select few people with whom I am willing to consistently interact with and actually enjoy it quite a lot. But that is a small and special club of people. It is not anywhere close to the majority of people that I could come in contact with or become friends with. And this is just how I am. This is just the way that I am. It's why I'm not on Discord. It's why I have a dumb phone, with my SIM in there. It's why I do not spend exorbitant amounts of time on the internet chatting with people. It is why I don't spend time IRL chatting with people. I spend my time IRL doing the same things that you hear about me doing on here, engaging in my passions and my interests, educating myself further, etc. These are the things that really matter to me. These are the things that ultimately make my world go round. Obviously there is a desire to socialize among all of us. I think with me it is severely limited in comparison to the majority, but nonetheless it exists. Um, I think, to the extent that it exists, it can be fulfilled by a small number of people, a small range of people that I have cultivated, um, on these other platforms, these with free software, with encryption, kind of preventing a larger model of myself to be created by corporations and the botnet more broadly. You know, it's time for us to dig deeper.club, which is a really good website that I just randomly referenced in this video. Check out digdeeper.club. It has a lot of great information about privacy, something I'm quite passionate about that I talk about on this channel, which is kind of ironic given how much of myself I happen to share on this channel, but I do think it's a human right. I think it's extremely important. And for as much of myself as I like to share on YouTube, as much about myself as I happen to talk about, I still think that one's private conversation should remain, in fact, private, much in the same way that I think the things that we do in the privacy of our own home should continue to be private. And the way in which corporations happen to be mining all of our data, selling all of our data, and building these models of us in order to better surveil us, of course with the help and collaboration of governments, is very concerning. And I don't want to use technology in a way that facilitates that process insofar as I am concerned, or insofar as anyone else is concerned for that matter. I don't want anything to do with that whole world. And Discord, for example, only represents the further encroachment of that world upon my own. I don't like that. I don't like that. It seems that the only reason I have made accounts there in the recent past has been to reach out to my wife. It has been to attempt to quote-unquote remedy my preference for solitude. And like every time that I attempt to do that, it utterly fails. I fail to become less introverted and more willing to engage in consistent interactions. So why keep up this whole charade? Why continue? Why continue to attempt to interact with people when time and time again my brain will tell me, no, I don't want to do that. I would rather be doing this other thing that is more important to me right now. Why keep up the facade, the artifice of being someone who is attempting to socialize if I'm not going to attempt to socialize in the end? It doesn't make any sense. I don't want anything to do with that. And I certainly don't want anything to do with non-free, non-open source software. I want to live a private life on my own terms. Those terms include putting a lot of my life out there. But that does not include my conversations being for sale. It doesn't include myself being for sale. I don't put ads on these videos, or anywhere for that matter, anywhere where I make content. There's no mechanism by which I can extract money for people, at the hands of corporations, with the help of corporations. I don't do that. I'm not about that life. So in the end, I find myself wanting to live in the woods yet again, with contact to the internet, but minimal contact. Updating my channel, talking on BBSs and image boards anonymously, talking to people anonymously through free encryption methods. But beyond that, just kind of doing my own thing, IRL. So that's that. I think some people may ultimately be disappointed about my decision to be this isolated person. But to some extent, it doesn't even feel like a decision. It feels like there is this overwhelming inclination that I have towards this way of life that is almost unchangeable. I'm sure that I could change it if I wanted to change it enough, but I don't want to. I don't have that desire, and so I don't do it. I think there are people that are surprised at times that I operate this way, because in the context of friendships, I tend to be quite gentle. I tend to be quite kind and affable. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to them that I have these overwhelmingly isolationist and introverted tendencies outside of the fact that so often my response is, I can't right now, I'm busy, I'm studying, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, if I say anything at all. Maybe it's strange to imagine that there's someone out there who can be that introverted or that isolationistic and still um, be gentle and kind in the context of individual conversations. I don't know. Um, but I'm not this way because I want to hurt anyone's feelings. In fact, I think the best way that I can prevent hurting anyone's feelings is by continuing this lifestyle unfaltered in a way that is not influenced by the outside elements. Because without those connections, without anyone feeling connected to me, there's little room for disappointment by the mass of people. Not them disappointing me, but rather me disappointing them.